You folks now know my name, Davis. I am a singer, I am a storyteller, but my mom taught me that introductions are a two-way street, and I still do a lot of the things my mother taught me. In fact, she says I do more of them now than when she was trying to teach me. I'm actually going to go visit her. She lives in West Boylston now. I'm going to visit her on the way home, which is kind of fun. To save some time, I like to know who everybody is. On the count of three, just say your name. Ready, here we go. 1, 2, 3. Nice to meet you. Now, I may not remember all those names. That's a lot to learn at once. You have to remind me later. Don't take it personally. But now that we know each other, I can give you some stories and give you some songs. Some of the songs you probably know already. Some of them might be new to you. But everything I give you, I'm not going to take back. You get to keep them. Give them to somebody else. This first story is one of my mom's favorite stories, one of the reasons I like to tell it. I'll tell you why it's one of her favorites at the end. This story I found in a book. And this story traveled to New England. The program's called Celebrating New England. A lot of folks have traveled to New England over the years from many different places. Some as recently as last week maybe, some as long ago as 1,000 years ago when they walked over a land bridge, some in the 1600s, 1700s. This story arrived in the early 1900s, and it starts once upon a time. It's kind of in the rule book. When you're telling a story, you got to do at least one story like that. This is it. Once upon a time, there was a tailor. Now, tailors make clothes for a living, like you and I are wearing, shirts, hats, coats, all sorts of stuff. This tailor wanted one thing for himself. More than anything else in the world, he wanted a coat. For the time of year that's coming up soon, where it's going to get cold. But he was too poor to make something for himself. He always had to make something, sell it, get enough money to buy food, pay the rent, still have enough money to buy cloth to make something else to sell. But gradually he scrimped and saved. Anytime there was spare change jingling in his pocket, he would take the change out and put it in a jar. I would do that too, except we have a tradition in my family that my dad started, that the kids get to wrestle with the dad, and any change that falls out of the dad's pockets, the kids get to keep. So I don't get to keep my own change, even though my son is now 26. We skip the wrestling part. That would be really dangerous for me. We have a jar by the door. We both put our change in it. We split it up later. But this tailor didn't have any kids. He finally saved enough money to buy cloth to make something for himself, the coat. He made a big wool coat. It came way down below his knees. He liked it so much, he wore it even when it wasn't quite cold enough to wear it outside, unbuttoned, flapping in the breeze. He wore it and wore it and wore it till the coat was all worn out. At least he thought it was worn out. He looked and, there was a hole in the elbow. He'd just gotten a puppy. You know how puppies like to play, right? Well, they were playing one time and the puppy just jumped up and tore a little hole right in the back of the coat. But he looked and he saw there was enough good material left to make something else. So he took the coat, cut off the bottom, patched up the top, and had a jacket, which was better. He could wear it more often, and he did. He wore the jacket, wore it, and wore it, and wore it, till the jacket was all worn out. At least he thought it was. He looked, there was another hole, same elbow. He was always leaning on that elbow when he was thinking about what he was going to make, and he thought so hard he wore a hole in the elbow. And the puppy had grown up to be a dog, which is what most puppies do for a living, actually. It was a big dog, about this big, but even big dogs, they like to play. And they were playing, the dog jumped up, tore a hole in the back of the jacket. He looked and he saw there was enough good material left to make something else. So he took the jacket, cut off the sleeves, patched up the middle, and had a vest. Just about like this one, except there wasn't enough material for pockets, but he didn't care. He wore the vest almost every day. He wore it and wore it and wore it till the vest was worn out. At least he thought it was. Here and here was kind of shot. He was always bragging about what a good tailor he was. When he bragged, he held onto the vest like this, and he bragged so hard he wore holes here and here. But he didn't brag holding onto the back of the vest, because then he kind of looked like a chicken. And people would laugh like that. That's not the point of bragging, to have people laugh. That's just so the back was fine. There was enough good material left to make something else. He took the vest, he cut about 20 pieces out, and he sewed them up together into a nice cloth hat. Yeah, kind of like a patchwork baseball cap. He put it on his head, he looked at himself in the mirror, and he said, "Whoa, you're looking good." He was, actually. It's a very good thing to say to yourself every day, whether you're wearing a hat or not. A lot of us adults, we get out of the habit of it. Because we see all these ads that tell us we should look like other people. So in case this has happened to you, this is the only audience participation part of this story. Pretend you're putting on a hat, and I won't pretend because I got one. And hold up a mirror. There's safety in numbers. We're all going to do this. It may have been a while for some of you. I promise it feels really good. It could be a two-handed mirror, one-handed mirror, doesn't matter. Hold it up. Now on the count of 3, tell yourself, whoa, you're looking good. Ready? Here we go. 1, 2, 3. Whoa, you're looking good. Yeah, and you all look great to me. You do that every day, you feel great about yourself. And he did that every day because he wore the hat every day. He wore it indoors, he wore it outdoors. He even wore the hat to bed with him. The only time he took it off was to wash his hair. He wore the hat, wore it till the hat was, worn out. At least he thought it was. The brim was kind of shot, but over here was okay. There was enough good material left to make something he'd been needing a long time. He had a hole in the knee of one of his pairs of pants. So he made something you do not see as often as you did when I was a kid. He made a patch. Took the hat off, cut 10 pieces out, sewed them up into a patchwork patch, put it carefully over the hole, sewed it on. He liked that patch. That was the best patch he had made in his entire life. He liked it so much. When that pair of pants was dirty and it was time to wear his other pair of pants, he took the patch off the first pair and put it on the second pair, even though that pair didn't have a hole. He didn't care. He did it each week, moving the patch, one pair of pants, the other, wearing it till the patch was worn out. At least he thought it was. Because he looked at the patch, there was a hole in the middle right through the first hole, but all 4 corners were really almost as good as new. So he took the patch, he cut the 4 corners, and he sewed them up into a nice cloth button. Yep. And he put the button right on his shirt, even though he was wearing a t-shirt. He sewed it on, kind of like a belly button right about here. And he liked the button so much, he did the same thing he'd done with the patch. He moved it from shirt to shirt. Sometimes we're on the back, the front, the sleeve. He wore it and wore it and wore it till the button was worn out. At least he thought it was. Because when he looked at the button, he could see, there was just enough left of it to make a story out of it. And he made a story out of it, and now I've told it to you. And that's the story. Now, the nice thing about stories, a lot of them, they don't get worn out as quickly as clothing. That story is over 300 years old, and I have told it hundreds of times. So if you want to tell it to somebody, you don't have to worry about wearing it out. And if you forget what comes next, all you got to do is make the article of clothing smaller than the thing that came before it. It's a fun story to tell. My mom likes that because she's a quilter. And she'd go out and buy material for quilts, but she'd also save material for quilts. She once made a quilt out of my old blue jeans from about 7th grade to 12th grade. She saved them, and then she cut squares out of them, all these different colors of denim and different fades, and patched them together into a quilt. So that's why she likes that story. And that story actually used to be a song. It's an old Yiddish folk song that came to this country from Europe, maybe Germany, Austria, around 1900 or so. And someone whose singing voice was the kind of voice, whenever they started singing, people would go like this. Oh, don't do that. They decided they better stop singing and just tell it, so that people would actually hear it. And it got collected, put in a book. This song is still a song and a story, and it came to this country from a different part of Europe. It came from Yorkshire, England, then traveled over into Nova Scotia and Newfoundland and down into Maine, where it got collected. It has a chorus, which I'm going to teach you, that we'll sing together. I'll sing the verses because I know them, it's only fair. The chorus goes like this. It's very simple. It goes, Fal de la day. That's it. It makes no sense, but it's short. So it's easy to remember. Yeah, and we're going to do a little rehearsal on the count of 3. I'll count to 3. We'll sing that together. And I should just remind you, this is folk music. There's actually not any such thing as a really wrong note when you're singing it in groups like this. So don't worry about this too hard. Ready? On the count of 3. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. Fal de la day. You got it. And yep, that's it. And harmonies are welcome, 2 part 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 12. And you'll know when it's coming, because the last 2 words of every verse where the story is and sing. so you'll know exactly what to do afterwards. It won't take you by surprise. Here's the story. Ready, here we go. There was a rich farmer in Yorkshire did dwell, had Jack for a servant, and that you know well. The cows being gathered, he had one to spare. He said, Johnny, me boy, you must go to the fair and sing. Fa-la-la-day. Well, in through the glare and out through the glen, Jack led the cow with a rope in his hand. And on his way there he came to 3 men, and he sold them the cow for 16 pounds 10 and sing. Fa-la-la-day. Came to an old woman, to her he did say, where shall I put all this money away? Into your coat lining, to him she did say, in case on the road some robber may be, and sing. Fa-la-la-day. Well, on his way home he came to a dark lane. Out jumped a robber, I'll tell you in plain. Deliver your money without any strife, or with this flat sword I'll take your sweet life, and sing. Fa-la-la-day. Well, he ripped open the lining, the money fell out. All in the tall grass it lay scattered about. And while the robber was picking it up in his purse, Jack made no delay, but jumped on the robber's horse and sang. Fa-la-la-day. Well, the robber he called out, he bade Jack to stay. Jack made no answer, just rode on his way. Straight home to his master's own house he did go, with a bridle and saddle instead of a cow, and sing. Fa-la-la-day. Well, the farmer came out all in a great fuss. He said, Johnny, me boy, me cow's turned into a horse. Oh, master, your cow I've sold, but I have been robbed of your silver and gold, and sing. Fa-la-la-day. Well, they looked in the saddle, and lo and behold, 5,000 pounds of silver and gold, besides 2 brass pistols, and the farmer did vow. He said, Johnny, me boy, you've well sold me cow, and sing. Fa-la-la-day. And now for your brave and honorable day, half of this money will come to your pay. Besides, if she'll have you, my daughter, for a wife, and you shall live well all the days of your life, and sing. Fa-la-la-day. That's the song. And it goes by 2 titles. I've seen Jack the Cowboy and The Well-Sold Cow. And I like to think that Jack and the farmer's daughter saw through the plan to keep all the money in the family. And they liked each other okay, but maybe not that much. So he took his half of the money and walked down the road the ways and got a place for himself. You know, you can do that with stories, you know. If you're telling it and you don't like the ending, change it. Or if you want to know what happens next and nobody ever told you, you get to make it up. That's how these stories change, as they wander around from place to place. Songs actually change because people like it. At first it's short, you know, it's got a chorus, it's got a couple verses, and you sing it, especially work songs. And as they sang it more and more and worked through these songs, the verses get more and more verses. This is a song from Cape Cod that I actually like a lot. I used to go down to the Cape a lot when I was a kid. I'll tell you about that later. But I found this song when I was staying down at the Cape, going to the Sturgis Library, which is one of several libraries that claims to be the oldest continuous operating library in the United States. But I used to get books out of there. We'd walk from our cottage down there, and I'd get books, bring them home. The Revolutionary War twins books that my mom had actually read when she was a kid. I was reading them, and she got them out from the same library. When I was about 25 or so, I was staying down in that cottage and found this song. And this song has a chorus, but it's kind of like in between the verses. The way it would work was you're hauling sail. Someone, a shantyman usually would sing a line, and then everybody would sing the line together as they hauled the sail up. And then the shantyman would sing another line, everybody sing the line together. I'm not going to make you work. I'm not going to make you haul any sails, but it would be more fun if you actually sang the choruses with me. I'll teach them to you. Again, call and response. I got to do the line in my head. And then I'll sing a line that goes, heave away, haul away. Let's try that together. Heave away, haul away. And then I'll sing a line that goes, bound for South Australia. We'll sing that together. Ready? Bound for South Australia. And that's the way it goes the whole way through until we're done. I'm not going to sing all the verses because I got other stuff to do. more stories and songs to tell afterwards, but I'll sing enough of them for you to get the idea. And whenever we sing together, I'll raise my arm like this, which will be the only work that's happening the entire time we sing. All right? Cape Cod boys don't need no combs. Heave away, haul away, they comb their hair with codfish bones. Bound for South Australia. Heave away, me bully, bully boys. Heave away, haul away, heave away, and don't you make a noise. We're bound for South Australia. Cape Cod girls don't need no combs. Heave away, haul away, they comb their hair with codfish bones. Bound for South Australia. Cape Cod boys don't need no sleds. Heave away, haul away, they slide down hills on codfish heads. Bound for South Australia. Cape Cod doctors don't need no pills. Heave away, haul away, they feed their patients codfish gills. Bound for South Australia. This is one of my favorites. Cape Cod mamas don't bake no pies. Heave away, haul away, they feed their children codfish eyes. Bound for South Australia. Heave away, me bully, bully girls. Heave away, haul away, heave away, and don't you lose your curls. We're bound for South Australia. That's the song. And oddly enough, that song always reminds me of my dad, and he never sang that song, but one of his favorite desserts, which my mom made about every other week or so, was tapioca pudding. Yep. And yep, she would serve it, and he would look at his bowl and say in the loudest voice possible, "Oh, good, fisheye pudding." And all us kids would go, "Ooh," and he said, "Well, taste it." And it was really good. And it did actually, if you think about it, look a little bit like tiny fish eyes. And my mom would groan and say, but he was the kind of guy who would say it, you know the kind of guys who do that? Every time something happens, they say the same thing. Yeah, that was my dad. And this, I think I'll do the story first and then the song. This story, when I first moved to the town of Leiden in western Massachusetts, I don't know if you've ever heard of the town of Leiden. I had never heard it before I moved there. It's just a little bit north of Greenfield. And I had friends who bought an old farm there, and they were farming, and I was going to go visit them. I ended up living there, buying a place there after a bit. But when I went to visit them, it was back in the days before GPS. So you'd buy a road map, right? I didn't have a road map of Massachusetts, so I went into the gas station, bought a road map, the kind that you unfold and have to figure out how to fold back up again. And I thought, okay, I'll look for Leiden, and I looked and it was there, but see, this map only had the state highways in Massachusetts on it. And Leiden is one of 2 towns in the state that does not have a state highway going to it. So there was this little circle, you know, this little white circle with Leiden next to it, but no road going to it. I had to drive to Greenfield to get directions, and I went there. But I didn't care if it wasn't easy to get to. In fact, I kind of liked the fact that it wasn't easy to get to. Until about 1962, all the roads leading into town were dirt. And then they finally made a tarred road, and the population jumped by about 25–30%. And Leiden was founded and incorporated 25 years apart, so every 25 years, they got to have a 50th anniversary. You know, the 50th anniversary of the founding, then the 50th anniversary of the incorporating 25 years later, and then the 100th anniversary, you know, it goes like that. And I can't remember, it was the 250th anniversary of the founding or the incorporating, but I just moved to town. They heard I was a storyteller, and they heard that I had a field recorder that you use to take oral history interviews. So they invited me to, even though I was a newbie, they invited me to be on the historical commission because they wanted to do an oral history project. And we went around collecting stories, and this story we got from Henry Glayback. Henry Glayback had been living in town since he was a kid. He was a blacksmith. He was in his 80s when I first met him, and he was still doing blacksmithing, mostly repairing wheels for Sturbridge Village, the kind of wooden wheels that have a metal rim around them. He'd repair them for those. But when he grew up, he'd walk to school before he was ever thinking about being a blacksmith, he'd walk right by the blacksmith shop. And one morning, as he's walking to school, the blacksmith looked out and said, "Hey, Henry, on the way back from school, you want to split some wood for me, some kindling? I'll pay you a nickel." And Henry said, "Okay." And on the way back, he split wood, and the guy gave him a nickel. He got home and gave it to his dad, because that's what you did with money in those days. And every day after that, he'd walk to school a little early, do some chores for the blacksmith. He'd walk back, he'd do some chores for the blacksmith. And when he graduated from 6th grade, he decided not to go to 7th grade. He went to the blacksmith shop, and he became an apprentice. And the blacksmith didn't have any kids, so when he retired, he not only gave Henry his shop, he gave him his house across the street. And that's where Henry lived. And the blacksmith and his wife lived with Henry and his wife until they passed away. That's how it worked in those days. And we were sitting around a table, Henry and his wife, Jessie. Jessie had been a school teacher. That's the way it worked a lot in town. You'd hire a school teacher in a one-room schoolhouse. They'd work for 2-3 years. They'd get married. Then you have to hire another school teacher because they didn't let married teachers teach in those days. And they're sitting around, and Henry just talked about blacksmithing, and then he said, "Hey, Jessie, why don't you tell about that time you were working at East Hill School?" And Jessie looked at Henry, and she looked at the tape recorder, sitting right there in the middle of the table. She looked at Henry, she looked at the tape recorder, and then she looked at Henry and she said, "Henry, I don't like the way my voice sounds on those things. I sound too much like a man. Why don't you tell the story?" So he did, because Henry usually did what Jessie told him to do. And the way it happened was, it was not long after Jessie was hired to teach. Leiden had 5 one-room schoolhouses. If you looked at the map of town, there was a road coming north and south between Greenfield and Brattleboro, and a road going east and west between Coleraine and Bernardston. And there were 5 one-room schoolhouses, 3 going north, 3 going east to west. The one in the middle was the same, so you didn't count it twice. That's 5. And every Christmas, they'd have Christmas parties in the school. Yep. They start in the morning at West Leiden School. The school was about half the size of this room. And there'd be a potbelly stove in one corner of the school and a Christmas tree in the far corner of the school, because you did not put those 2 things close together. And there'd be a stool next to the Christmas tree, and the kids would hear sleigh bells, right? And of course, they couldn't have all the parties at the same time. They'd start in the morning and finish up in the afternoon, because how could Santa Claus come to all the schools if they had the parties at the same time? They'd stagger them. And in West Leiden School, the kids there were the first ones to hear the sleigh bells, and they would run to the door, and they'd look, and they'd see Henry Glayback's dad driving a 2-horse sled, and right next to him on the sled would be Santa Claus. And the kids would rush up. They'd help Santa Claus down off the sled. And they go, "Hey, Santa, where's your reindeer?" And he'd say, "Oh, my reindeer. Well, they have so many friends around here out in the woods that I land at Henry's dad's place, and I let them loose, and they go off in the woods. He's nice enough to bring me on the sled. Don't you think that's nice?" I say, yeah, come on inside. And they drag him inside. He'd sit on the stool. And all the kids, he had a sack, with toys in it, 1 package for each kid, no names on any present. But he knew which present was for which kid. And kids would take turns sitting on his lap, all except the twins. There was something in the water in the town of Leiden. Every school had at least 1 set of twins. And East Hill School, where Jessie Glayback taught, they had 3 sets of twins in the school. It's kept going to this day. Twins are still getting born in town. I don't know what it is. And when the twins came up, luckily he had 2 knees. They could both get on at the same time. And he'd visit with all the kids, ask them what their year had been like, what they're looking forward to, give them each present. Then he'd say, "Merry Christmas," and he'd go off and get on the sled and go to the next school. Well, one year, Henry told me, the year Jessie was teaching in West Leiden School, Santa Claus must have been working really hard. He seemed kind of tired. Bags under his eyes, not as lively and quick as usual. So when the last kid got off Santa's lap, and he leaned a little bit too close to the Christmas tree. Now these days, that would make no never mind. But this was back before electricity in town. In order to have lights on the trees,
You had candles. Little candles about this long, white, green, red, but stuck in these little candle holders with fluted bottoms to catch the wax. They were silver, and they had a little clip on the bottom of them, kind of like a clothespin. They'd be stuck out on the ends of the branches. And one of the teacher's jobs was when she heard the sleigh bells and the kids ran out to get Santa Claus, she would light as many candles as she could on the tree before the kids dragged Santa Claus inside. And then when he left, she would blow out the candles. Well, he hadn't left yet. She hadn't blown out the candles. When he leaned too close to the tree, his beard caught in the flame of one of the candles, and Santa Claus's beard actually caught on fire. And he stood up. He got away from the kids. He's standing in the middle of the school, right on the braided rug that was there. He started batting at his beard. Now, Jessie Glayback, she was a quick-thinking woman. That's one of the reasons they hired her as a school teacher. She rushed over and she picked Santa Claus up off the ground. She was also a big woman. That's the other reason they hired her as a school teacher. And she threw Santa Claus right down in the middle of the braided rug, right prone on the rug. She rolled up the rug with Santa Claus inside it. She picked up the rug with Santa Claus inside it. She went to the front door of the school. She kicked it open and she threw the rug with Santa Claus inside it right out into a snowbank. Then she trudged out through the snow. She picked up the rug with Santa Claus inside it, brought it back, plopped it down, gave it a kick, it unrolled, and there was Santa Claus lying in the middle of the braided rug. And his beard was about 4 inches shorter, but the fire was put out. And he stood up and he looked at Jessie and he said, "Oh, thanks a lot, Jessie." And he looked at the kids and said, "Merry Christmas," and he picked up his empty sack and went off with Henry's dad to go gather up his reindeer. And when Henry told me that story around the kitchen table in 1982, he looked at me and he said, to this day, whenever Santa Claus visits the town of Leiden once a year, after visiting every house, he makes 2 turns around town up there in the sky with his sleigh, and he yells down, "Merry Christmas," and "Hey, thanks a lot, Jessie." And that's a true story, how a teacher in a 1-room schoolhouse in western Massachusetts saved Santa Claus's life. And it's a good thing, too. And I know that story's true, 1, because I trust Henry and Jessie, but 2, a couple years later, I was over at a church in Bernardston at a church supper and told stories after supper. And I told that story, and a woman came up to me, and she looked at me and said, "I was a first grader in West Leiden School on the day that happened, and I will never, ever forget it." She swore that it was true. Yeah. Now, when I lived in Leiden, I lived with this guy named Bobby Krautwurst. When I first lived in Leiden, I moved into town. I was looking for a place. I didn't figure it out yet. And Bobby, I had helped him with haying a little bit when I was visiting my friends. Their farms were kind of across fields from each other. If you went by road, you had to go this way and that way. But if you went a straight line through the woods, you got there pretty quick. So we'd help him with his hay, because he did that out there. And I needed a place to stay. And I said, "Bobby, you got some room?" And I said, "Yeah." "Well, can I rent from you?" He said, "Oh, you don't have to rent. Just help me with haying, help me with sugaring, and that'll be enough." And so that's what I did. I stayed there. And when I moved in with Bobby, folks asked me, "Well, what are you 2 guys going to talk about?" Bobby, he wouldn't say boo to a goose. It wasn't actually true, Bobby just had to know the goose first, and then he'd talk up a wild streak, And Bobby was called a tractor cowboy because he'd get a tractor unstuck from just about anywhere. And the reason why is he could get a tractor stuck just about anywhere. He would go places nobody else would dare go in a tractor, and then he would get stuck, and then he would just wrap a chain around the tractor, a chain around the tree, he'd reverse, and the chain would wrap around the wheel and pull himself right out, and then he'd keep on going around his business. He wasn't afraid of any mud hole in anywhere in the woods. I loved working with Bobby, and we would do haying, and Bobby worked delivering town criers, because a lot of farmers, you can't make enough money farming, so you have to take odd jobs. So he delivered those little news, mostly ad magazines that hang on the outside of your mailbox because they can't legally put it inside your mailbox. He delivered those. And I had a job too, but I had some time, and I would rake the hay, and he'd get back around 5, and then we would bale up the hay, and by the time we finished baling the hay, it would be dark. full moonlight, it wasn't a problem. You could see all the bales. We'd go around, put them on the wagons, and then, let's see, if it wasn't a full moon night, we'd have to use my old Volvo with the headlights on and his pickup truck with the headlight on to see all the bales of hay. And Bobby, he could throw a bale of hay 7 bales high and have it land exactly where he wanted it to. I mean, he'd been throwing bales of hay since he was 6 years old. The time I met him, he was in his early 50s, and he could just throw a bale of hay high and then have it land. 6 bales, same thing. 5 bales, same thing. Didn't matter how high he was throwing it. He knew exactly how hard to throw it to have it land exactly where he wanted it. I tried when we got to 6 bales high, and the first time I threw it, I didn't throw it hard enough, and it landed back on my head. And then I tried again. I threw a little harder, and it rolled all the way over and off the other side. And that's when Bobby said, "Why don't you just climb up, and I'll throw them to you?" And I did. I climbed up there, and he would throw them, and I just shift them a little bit, get them in the right place. And then, since I was up 7 bales high, I wouldn't climb down. It was too hard. I'd just lie on my back, and we'd go back to the barn in the dark to unload, usually by around midnight. And I would put my hand over my face while I'm lying on top of the bales, because when you're 7 bales high and you're going back on a farm road, the trees, the branches stick out over the farm road, and if you didn't keep your hand there, the branches would knock the nose right off your face. And so I just had my hand there, and one night I was going back, and I suddenly remembered this song I learned in college, and I started singing it lying on my back in the full moonlit night. And I'm going to teach you that song. It's got a longer chorus than we've been doing, so I'll teach you it in stages. One line together, one line together, just like that. And it's pretty easy to learn. You may have heard it. It's by a guy named David Mallet, who lives up in Maine, called the Haying Song. It goes like this. Oh, you have to make hay when the sun shines. Try that part. Oh, you have to make hay when the sun shines. Then it goes, that's what all of the hill people say. That's what all of the hill people say. You just keep your load wide, keep an eye on the sky. Try that. You just keep your load wide, keep an eye on the sky. And make sure it's dry when you put it away. And make sure it's dry when you put it away. It's actually a good haying day out there right now, dry and hot. Let's string that all together. You'll get it by the end. Don't worry about it too much. Ready? Here we go. Oh, you have to make hay when the sun shines. That's what all of the hill people say. You just keep your load wide, keep an eye on the sky, and make sure it's dry when you put it away. When the raspberries burst through the woodbine, and summer lies close to the ground, and the porch is a fit place for young folk to sleep, the brook in the hollow dies down. Well, then with straw hats and wagons and horses, like young Tim and tired old Dan, we'll head for the fields through the creak of the wheel, with a pitchfork that blisters your hand. Now the chorus. Oh, you have to make hay when the sun shines. That's what all of the hill people say. You just keep your load wide, keep an eye on the sky, and make sure it's dry when you put it away. Well, I remember the chaff on the back of my neck, the cool at the edge of the stream, where you'd rest for a while, you talk about the weather, you drink from the spring, you get mud on your knees, and then it's back to the wagon, it's back to the mow. 6 loads in and 8 more to go. And there's biscuits and beans at the late supper meal, and there's nothing like beans when you're working, Oh, you have to make hay when the sun shines. That's what all of the hill people say. You just keep your load wide, keep an eye on the sky, and make sure it's dry when you put it away. It's the season of clover and killdeer. It's the time when the earth does her best. It's when all folks are strong, the work days are long. You know when to rise, you know when to rest. And in the cool of the evening I'll perch on the mow. Let the wagon wind blow through my hair. And I'll count off the stars and talk to the moon and sing to myself in the sweet summer air. Hang on at the corners and duck from the branches and sing to myself in the sweet summer air. Last time. Oh, you have to make hay when the sun shines.
That's what all of the hill people say. You just keep your load wide, keep an eye on the sky, and make sure it's dry when you put it away. That's the haying song. Thanks for singing. And you know, for a moment there, I was back up on top of that. Hey, you know, Bobby passed away about 6 or 7 years ago now, but every time I sing that song, you know, it's like he's right there. It's okay. You know, so thank you for singing it with me. And I started singing when I was a little kid because when we were kids, you know, we drove to visit my grandparents. We had one set of grandparents living on the Cape, another up in Maine. We lived in Pittsfield. In those days before the highways were built, it was a long way in a car with 3 boys separated by 3 years and 2 years. And the radio, you know, there weren't enough songs on there to entertain us, but my dad, he knew a lot of songs. So we'd sing these songs, you know, Down by the Old Mill Stream, all these other songs. And when bedtime happened around, he'd sing those songs again, a lot quieter than we sang them in the car. My bedtime until I was in 3rd grade was 7:30. That's when we were supposed to be in bed. You know, teeth brushed, bath every other night, pajamas. But then my mom or dad would read to us the Wizard of Oz books, which came from my dad's side of the family. We had some with like tattered covers with black tape on them. They'd been read so much. They were published in 1911, 1912, things like that. Or the Winnie the Pooh books, which came from my mom's side of the family. Then the lights would go out, and my mom or dad would sing to us. Sometimes for as much as half an hour. So my real go-to-sleep time was about 8:30. And this song I loved a lot when I was a kid. It was one of my favorite songs. And then, you know, as I grew up, I'd heard it thousands of times. And I got kind of tired of it. You know, I wanted to look for new songs. And then I learned how to play these. Yeah. Any of you have these at home? Oh, good. If you got these at home, I'll give you a short lesson on how to play music with spoons. One important thing to remember when you play music with spoons is if anybody in the room has a headache, it's a really good idea to go to another room, especially when you're a kid and they're your parent. These spoons, actually I got these spoons recently because I forgot my briefcase. I keep my spoons in my briefcase, and my mom would say to me when I was a kid that I would forget my head if it wasn't attached. And it's still true. Some of these things you do not grow out of. I remember more things, but I have more things to remember, so I still forget a significant portion. And I forgot my briefcase, and I got to this place I was going to tell stories. I said, I forgot my spoons. They said, we got spoons, take a couple. So I took these. They have a really nice sound. The way you play spoons is you put one spoon between your thumb and your first finger, and the next spoon goes between your first and second finger like that. You see how they form a long V? You close your fist around the V so the point of the spoons is in the palm of your hand. Every spoon is different, every hand is different, you have to shift them around, but get them about that far apart. When you hold them like that, then you need your knee for this. One of the reasons I brought my stool is for this. There. I had a knee before, but it just wasn't accessible. And then you tap the spoons on your knee like this. Or your hand. You get different sounds depending on what part of your body you tap them on. You can put your hand up above your knee, go back and forth. Run them across your fingers like this. Sort of the Lone Ranger effect, which kind of dates me a little bit. Then you can combine the different movements and sounds. And you can play music with spoons. And different spoons have different sounds. I'm not going to play all of them for you, it would bore you to tears, but these are really cool. I got these at Hampshire College at my 47th reunion. Man, that sounds weird. And you can hold spoons like this, and you can play them, but these spoons are made out of plastic. They're made out of corn oil plastic. So they have a very different sound than a regular plastic spoon. I'm going to move the microphone down to them because they're kind of softer. That's cool. Good. Just a pair of plastic spoons. The ones I'm going to play for this song are bigger.
These came from my drawer at home. They haven't lived in my drawer at home for about 25 years. They live in my briefcase. They're bigger because this is a work song. Not sung on the ocean like that first one we did. This one was sung by Irish American, African American, Chinese American, Japanese American, Italian American, and a whole bunch of other American railroad workers. People have been coming to this country for hundreds of years, building stuff together, not even speaking the same language. And often people have learned English by singing this song phonetically as they use these 16-pound sledgehammers and nailing the spikes to hold the tracks together. They would sing this. They would sing, I've been working on the railroad. You know it, right? All the live long day. Now that's how fast they sang, because they didn't want to get tired. My dad, when he was putting us to bed at night, he sang it faster than that because he wanted us to get tired. We had this tradition of rowdy bedtime songs for the first 15 minutes, and then the songs started to get slower and slower and slower, and hopefully our eyes would get lower and lower and lower. So we're going to sing it the speed my dad sang it. I'll play the spoons. You know how it goes. Ready? Here we go. I've been working on the railroad all the live long day. I've been working on the railroad just to pass the time away. Can't you hear the whistle blowing? Rise up so early in the morn. Can't you hear the captain shouting? Dinah, blow your horn. Go a wee bit faster. Dinah, won't you blow? Dinah, won't you blow? Dinah, won't you blow your horn? Dinah, won't you blow? Dinah, won't you blow? Dinah, won't you blow your horn? Let's whisper. Someone's in the kitchen with Dinah. Someone's in the kitchen, I know. Someone's in the kitchen with Dinah. Ouch. Strumming on the old banjo. A little bit faster. Singing bee-bye, fiddly-I-O. Bee-bye, fiddly-I-O. Bee-bye, fiddly-I-O. Strumming on the old banjo. That's it. And if you're having trouble holding the spoons just right, or if you're teaching kids, like grandkids or neighbor kids or something, how to do it and their hands aren't quite big enough, you can take a pair of spoons and put a wedge between them in place of your finger, like some clay or a little block of wood, a rolled up piece of cardboard, and then take duct tape. It's another great use for duct tape besides repairing cars. Now that they've got colors of duct tape, I had a red Subaru that got by for 3 years with strategically placed duct tape on the body. You can wrap the duct tape around the spoons, and the tape and the wedge will hold them in the right place, and you got a musical instrument you made yourself out of a pair of spoons. It's kind of cool. There's another instrument, I got time for this, I think, that I brought with me. Yeah, percussion instrument from Scotland, Ireland, Wales, and also from the southeast of this country. You can see it's a dog. When I'm doing stuff at libraries and little kids are there, a little kid will raise their hand, like, 4 years old, look at me and go, "Is that a real dog?" And of course I always say yes. Because it is a real dog, it's just a wooden dog. It's a real wooden dog. They're cheaper. There's relatively few vet bills with a wooden dog. Occasionally a screw comes loose, you have to put it back on again. And he is actually sleeping right now. You can tell he's sleeping because he's on his back. I used to have a dog that always rolled over on their back when they slept, one paw stretched out. He sleeps on his back, even though his eyes are wide open. Wooden dogs always sleep with their eyes wide open. We gotta wake him up. Because he's gonna dance. That's what he does on this board, is a lumberjack. So on the count of 3, if you could just whisper with me. Some people like to be woken up by really loud noises, alarm clocks, people yelling in the room. He does not like that at all. So he gets cranky. So on the count of 3, we'll whisper together, "Bingo, please wake up." See, if I do it by myself, doesn't work. All right, here we go. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Bingo, please wake up. It worked. He's awake. Oh. So all we need for a dog named Bingo to dance to is some kind of song. What do you think would work for a dog named Bingo? That one. That's his favorite song. And have you ever done it that way where the first time through you spell his whole name, right? You know, B-I-N-G-O, but the next time you clap on the B, and the next time 2 claps, then 3, then 4, then 5. We do it that way, he'll do some really fancy dancing. And I'm gonna have to shift around a little bit because I gotta help him dance. I gotta sit on this stool, which is the other reason I brought it. Stay for a second. Okay, Bingo, you can get on the board to dance. Takes him a while to get ready. Does he look ready? Either that or he's doing yoga. He does a really mean downward dog. All right, on the count of 3, we'll all sing together. You'll hear him dance on the board because what happens is his feet, which are wood, strike the board, which are wood, and it's kind of like a percussion instrument. It is actually a percussion instrument. Here we go. Ready? 1, 2, 3. There was a farmer had a dog, Bingo was his name, oh, B-I-N-G-O, 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 and Bingo was his name, oh. Good, take a break. Now this time through, we'll clap on the B. I'll sing the word clap, because my hands, they're kind of occupied. Ready? There was a farmer had a dog, Bingo was his name, oh, clap, I-N-G-O, clap, I-N-G-O, clap. I-N-G-O, and Bingo was his name, oh. 2 claps this time, give it a try. There was a farmer had a dog, Bingo was his name, oh. Clap, clap, N-G-O, clap, clap, N-G-O, clap, clap, N-G-O, and Bingo was his name, oh. 3 claps this time, here we go. There was a farmer had a dog, Bingo was his name, oh. Clap, 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 G-O, clap, 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 G-O, clap, 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 G-O, and Bingo was his name, oh. 4 claps this time, give it a try. There was a farmer had a dog, Bingo was his name, oh. Clap, 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 oh, clap, 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 oh, clap, 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 oh, Bingo was his name, oh. Last time, 5 claps. Watch for fancy dancing, he can't stop. There was a farmer had a dog, and Bingo was his name, oh. Whoa! Bingo was his name, oh. Yeah, and he likes to take a bow afterwards, and then usually he'll fall asleep. You know, it's kind of cool. When I got out of college, I worked as a puppeteer with a theater company for a while. And Bingo, even though it's a musical instrument called a lumberjack, I'm going to wake him up a little bit. He is kind of like a puppet. You know, the way you work a puppet and animate a puppet is, even though it's an inanimate object, this is very cheap to make. It's just a little scrap of wood, cut out in the shape of a dog's body, then 4 other scraps on each side for legs, and then you paint it, it's got a face and hole in the back. It's just really easy to make, but then you make it come alive just by turning the body in certain ways. And little kids, they'll come up when I'm done with the show, they'll say, "Can I pet Bingo?" And to that little kid, that 3-year-old, that 4-year-old, Bingo is alive. Right at that moment, Bingo actually exists as a live creature, and they pet him, and they say, "Oh, where does he live?" And I say, "He lives in my briefcase. Can I help you put him in his briefcase?" You know, and they'll help me, and they go, "Night, night, Bingo." And there's a magic to that you cannot buy at all. No matter how much money you have, you cannot buy that moment of magic with a young kid. And it's so much fun to do that kind of thing. I got time for one song and then one story. This is another song I learned in college, at Hampshire College, where my daughter is actually going to graduate from this spring, which is kind of cool. Both went to the same place, a number of years apart. And this song I learned at college from a guy named Michael Cooney, and it always reminds me of my grandfather, my mom's dad, Gramp Allen, the one who we went to the Cape to visit, because Gramp Allen is the one who taught me how to spit watermelon seeds. This is something that a lot of parents neglect to teach their children for a number of reasons, I suspect. And we were sitting around at the Cape, it was a rainy day, and we're having watermelon, and my grandfather said, "You know how to spit watermelon seeds?" I was 3 years old, and I said, "No." And he said, "Well, I'll teach you." And my mom and my grandmother got up from the table and went into the kitchen. And so he taught me how to, shape your mouth just right, take one of those. You don't get watermelon seeds the way you used to in watermelon. They used to get a lot of big seeds, and they were great to spit. Now the seeds have gotten smaller and smaller and started to disappear. Well, he taught me how to spit them up at the ceiling, and he taught me how to spit them so hard that they'd actually stick to the ceiling. So we made all these constellations. You can see why my mom and my grandmother went to the kitchen. But they didn't mind too hard, because when we got done, of course, and we ran out of seeds, my grandfather would pick me up. I was born when he was 50, so he was 53 years old. He'd pick me up and hold me up, and I would take the watermelon seeds off of the ceiling and put them down, you know. And so this song about watermelon always reminds me of Gramp, and your part in this song is very simple, even simpler than that first chorus we learned. It's the sound you make when you eat watermelon, which is... Yeah, and you don't usually get to do this loud in public, but now it's okay because it's in a song, all right? So don't be shy. On the count of 3, we'll all do that together. Ready? 1, 2, 3. That was good. I could hear you, which is a lot better than normal. But this is the sweetest watermelon you ever tasted, so a little bit more oomph, just a little. On the count of 3, ready? Here we go. 1, 2, 3. Good. Now, whenever I move my arm like this, you'll make that sound in the song. This is the song the mice sing in my garden every summer. You have to be up late to hear them and be able to translate mouse, but just take my word for it. This is the song they sing. You can plant a watermelon up above our house and let the juice seep through. You can plant a watermelon up above our house, that's all we ask of you. Chocolate chip cookies, they taste mighty fine. Nothing's quite as sweet as a watermelon vine. You can plant a watermelon up above our house and let the juice seep through. That's it. It's very short. Now, I don't know if you've ever been going through a closet or a drawer, or you're up in the attic, you're moving boxes around, you open this box that hasn't been opened in 20 years, and you see something in that box, and you take it out, and all of a sudden, you're someplace else, right? 20 years ago, 30 years ago, you're someplace else. You're with somebody you haven't thought about in a while, in a place you haven't thought about, and these stories come back to you. These days, we don't tell stories as much as folks used to, because we got these things that tell stories for us, you know, and we got the football game on after Thanksgiving dinner, so you're watching something, you're not sitting around like trying to get up because you've eaten too much, and swapping stories to pass the time so you don't have to wash the dishes. And if you don't tell stories, you forget them. But sometimes objects can bring back stories, like that thing you found in the box, or if you look up here, you see this ring? This ring was my grandfather Alan's wedding ring. Grandpa Allen, he wore this ring for 62 years. That's how long he and Graham were married. And as I said, Graham and I, we were born 2 days and 50 years apart. I was born April 4th, 1955, and he was born April 2nd, 1905. So maybe it was being born so close to April Fool's Day, but Graham liked to play tricks. Like this one, I'd always sit next to him at the dinner table so he could do it. I'd be sitting there minding my own business. He would reach under the table where nobody could see him, and he would grab my knee, right in that funny bone spot. You know that spot? The tickles? And it would tickle me so much, I would jump. And you know what surprised me? I'd jump. My mom, she'd look over at me, sit in my chair, she'd go, Davis, stop fooling with your grandfather. Mom, he's the one who did it. Cut it out. A little while later, reach over again, he'd grab my knee again. And I would jump. She'd say, Davis, stop fooling with your grandfather. You're going to have to go to bed. Mom, he's really the one doing it. I found out later when my mother was a kid, her father, my grandfather, used to do the same thing to her. Reach under the table, grab her knee, she would jump, and her mother, my grandmother, would say, Nancy, stop fooling with your father. You're going to have to go to bed. I wanted one thing more than anything else in the world. I wanted to get him back. I wanted to grab his knee and make him jump. But he started doing this to me when I was about 3 years old. My hand was too small. His knee was too big. I would try, but I couldn't get around far enough. It wouldn't work. He'd just smile, reach over, grab my knee. I would jump. My mom would say, Davis, it took me until I was 13 years old for my hand to get big enough and for me to get fast enough. I'd almost given up hope, but one Thanksgiving dinner, I'm sitting next to Gramp, like I always did. He's on this side. My brother Rick's on the other side of him. And Gramp is turning and talking to Rick. And I thought, here's my chance. I'll surprise him. I reached over as quick as I could. I grabbed his knee, and my hand must have just grown a little bit or something, because for the first time ever, I hit that spot. I grabbed him so hard, it tickled him so much, he jumped so high, his knees hit the table. The whole table shook, milk spilled here and there, all over the table, and my mother looked over at my grandfather and she said, "George, stop fooling with your grandson or you're going to have to go to bed." And he just looked at me and he laughed, and after that we were always trying to get each other under the table, grab each other's knee, make each other jump, even when he was in his 80s and I was in my 30s. We're still doing it. I had a lot of fun with Grant growing up. He taught me how to play baseball. He taught me how to go fishing down at the Cape for striped bass or still fishing for flounder and tautog. And he taught me something about teasing. Whenever my mother would say to me, "Davis, stop fooling with your grandfather, you're going to have to go to bed," he would stop. He would stop fooling with me. He never put me in the position to have him go to bed because he was the one fooling around. He mostly knew when to stop. And maybe that's why the first time I ever teased my son, Will, I did this. He was sitting in a high chair. You know how adults sometimes put kids in high chairs when they're making dinner? And they have those toys that stick to the tray, you know, those rattles, or maybe if they're old enough, some Cheerios spread over to keep him busy. Well, I was taking a break from making dinner, and I started to feed Will Cheerios, and I thought, maybe he's ready for a trick. So I held out the Cheerio, and just as he was about to get it, just as his mouth was about to close around it, I pulled it away. So he missed it. He bit down on air. He got this confused look on his 1-year-old face as if to say, "Where's that Cheerio?" So I held it up in his face and he would say, "Oh, there it is." And he went to get it, and just as he was about to get it, I pulled it away again. This time he got the joke. I sort of knew he would, or I probably wouldn't have tried it in the first place. He laughed, I laughed. The third time I held out the Cheerio, I let him get it. Because you quickly learn as an adult, or even sooner, you do not tease 1-year-olds for very long, unless you want to deal with the consequences. And he chewed it up and swallowed, and then he looked at me, he looked at the Cheerios on his tray, and he picked one up, and he held it out to me. And I thought, this is going to be interesting. So I went to get it, and just as I was about to get it, he pulled it away. He held it out again, pulled it away again, but the third time he held it out, he let me get it. So not only was he learning a 1-year-old how to tease, he was also beginning to learn when to stop, which is the most important thing about it and what can make it fun. And you know, when he was 6 and his sister was 1, we were having dinner, and suddenly he and I remembered that story. You know how it is when you both know a story? It comes to mind and you both tell it back and forth to each other, kind of shorthand. We did that, we got to the end, we all laughed, and his sister was in her high chair, and I heard her say, "Dad," and I looked over, and she had some Cheerios left over from before dinner on her tray, and she was holding one of them up and holding it out to me, and I looked at her and I said, "Do you want me to get that?" And she just went like this, she went. So I went to get it, and just as I was about to get it, she pulled it away. She held it out again, pulled away again, but the third time she held it out, she let me get it. So you never know what's going to happen when you tell a story. My grandfather, unfortunately, didn't get to live long enough to see my kids get born, but they know him because I tell stories about him. Every time I tell that story, it's like my grandfather's here, and even my kids are here. And you may have an object at home like this ring or a photograph reminds you of somebody. You tell a story about them, they'll be right there with you the whole time. So I hope you tell your favorite story to somebody else. Doesn't have to be one of mine, you know. Thank you.